Hello, everyone. I'll give you a second to get connected to sound. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rails 1266 New Social Environment. I'm Magley, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Chloe Wise and Ajay Kurian. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Chloe Wise's practice spans diverse media, including painting, sculpture, video, and installation. For grounding an interest in the history of portraiture, Wise examines the multiple channels that lead to the construction of a self, paying particular attention to the interweaving of consumption and image making. Wise looks to the consumptive habits built around structures like advertising, fashion, taboo, and multinational brand with parody and derision, underlying how the body is framed and becomes excessive in its manipulation of these sites. And our host today, Ajay Kurian, is an artist, educator, and writer. Kurian employs a fluid multimedia vocabulary which aims to articulate the social and environmental conditions that govern both our worldly and transcendental face. His work often tries to bridge the gap between the local and the cosmic. He's the founder of Nucrits, a global platform for virtual studio mentorship for artists of all backgrounds and experience. Kurian lives in Brooklyn. He holds a BA from Columbia University in visual arts and art history. And with that, I will hand it over to Audrey to get us started.
Hey everybody. It's nice to see you all here and it's nice to be with you, Chloe. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I was just saying that I'm a little jet lagged, so I got up very early. So this is kind of like just another thing. It's an evening almost for me, and I'm feeling really good to be here.
How you feeling about the show?
I'm so pleased. I'm really happy. It feels like almost a homecoming to be able to have had a show in Manhattan for the first time in a long time. The last time I had a show in New York was Uptown. So does that even count as Manhattan? I'm not sure. Not to be like uptown phobic, but and it was during COVID. So there was maybe five people let into the space at a time. And so this time it really feels kind of like a community moment. So many friends have been able to see it, people I love, other artists I respect. So I'm really happy about the accessibility of the show being in such a great location. And I'm just excited to be able to have such fun and profound conversations surrounding the work as I've been able to have and as we are able to have today. So thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the show, I want to say 2 weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it. I've seen a handful of shows of yours, and this is the one that I think like really feels like a different kind of arrival, both potentially in the kind of UFO sense and also in just you as an artist. And I guess I just want to start with myth information, which was triggering because I had a speech impediment growing up.
I'm so sorry.
Oh no, I'm totally kidding.
I have a speech impediment
But
currently, seeing that I speak so fast. So actually, that was kind of triggering to me.
But can you talk about the title? I feel like that's it you're good at titles that kind of punch yeah, just punch in multiple ways.
Yeah, so actually the punniness of the title at first when I came up with it offended me and I was like, it's too cute, it's too funny, and I don't want to work with a pun next option. But then I came back to it and I was thinking about how, you know, I think a lot of my work functions this way. I think at first glance, there's this, okay, that's easy. Okay, that's funny. Haha, I get the joke. And then maybe you sit like 30 more seconds and becomes clear that there's a perhaps multiple meanings, or maybe it's worth actually taking the time to think about it. And I thought about it, and myth and information both are, kinds of stories, kinds of things we consume, and both are ways that we create belief. Um, any number of religions are based on a foundational myth. I think also cultures are based on a foundational myth. The American exceptionalist myth, for example, is important to the way that we operate in the world. And
Hmm.
and at the same time, we're in a moment of extreme misinformation, and that feels like it is important to be aware of and prepared against at all turns. So it doesn't get less relevant, doesn't get more relevant than misinformation, especially at a moment that we're in. And then the idea of information being the kind of storytelling the kind of shared knowledge, data, whatever it might be, that in it seems in its wording to be provable. Myth
Mhm.
doesn't need to be provable. It needs to be shared orally. It needs to be portrayed visually. And my whole show is interested in the tendency of humans to use mythology, use storytelling and visual storytelling, painting and cinema, as a means of telling a story and either uniting people around that story, creating a religion, creating a cult, creating a following, creating a sense of belief, purpose, and community, as well as how visual languages are utilized to further those agendas.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, the whole show is based on partially the idea, for example, of angels. Angels in the Bible are are described verbally very differently than the angels we visually see represented in different kinds of forms throughout history and today. And so
Right.
in a way, that's a visual myth that we can talk about. And one more thing about myth is that Carl Jung's book on UFOs, um, I believe it's called UFOs, the modern myth of things seen in the sky, um, brings
Oh, wow.
word to the forefront in terms of the UFO phenomenon. And lastly, myth information is, sorry, myth information is a title of a sub chapter in Eric Davis's book Technosis, which was also very informative for me in this project.
Oh, that's really interesting. I haven't heard that book in a long time. I feel like there was a moment with these like technology books that were all about like the teleology of technology that got placed in. That's like an interesting foil for this show. Because there's a lot of things that I think are kind of like embedded and hidden, while there's other things that lay on the surface. Like there are very uh, specific references to kind of cultures of painting and cultures of cinema, from like the chiaroscuro of Caravaggio to sort of maybe like innuendos of Leonardo to maybe more specifically El Greco. I feel like El Greco has been an influence for you, and like we're seeing it more explicitly in just like how backgrounds are coming together and how that kind of really what I would call almost like gloomy spiritual light. Like, yeah, this one in particular.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
this
then
one
there's also like
is the
this
Alberto
huge,
clouds.
yeah. Do you consider this a diptych, like with the other?
No, it just so happens that they work really well that way. I wasn't even thinking of showing either of these together. I just made them. And then the way that they
Oh,
uh
really?
to each other just worked. Yeah.
That's so funny because like I read the title of the first one and the second one. So the first one's A Spiritual Threat, which is the sort of darker one. And then the second one is Reenchantment,
By any
um,
means necessary. Yeah.
Reenchanting by Any Means Necessary. And I almost took it as like Old Testament versus New Testament. Like spiritual threat, there's so much violence in the Old Testament. And then in order to sort of like reinvigorate that mythology, that belief system, there has to be this like beautiful efflorescent love for everything that happens. And it felt like a rebirth of this character, um, and also a rebirth of like how that religion can persist.
That's an awesome reading.
That's I like totally I was like, oh, this has to be the case.
Nope. But that works perfectly because I think what my whole sort of body of work here is getting at is a lot of these tropes that are allegorical, that are repeated throughout the Bible, art history, and different mythologies that aren't even in the, Judeo-Christian sense, but that there are these universalities between religions and systems of belief, that obviously there's the good and the evil, the dark and the light, the mystery, and then what becomes illuminated. And all of these are really important to myth building and, I don't want to say manufacturing, but the cobbling together of belief itself. And so I think a lot of these paintings will appeal to a lot of recognizable visual patterns and tropes. And that's what I want to happen. You know, the one on the left here has both that art historical, almost golden ratio that,
Hmm.
of course, harkens back to any number of high Baroque or Renaissance paintings. And at the same time, there is also this cinematic tableau, this sort of sense of light in the darkness that you could also, knowing my references, you could read through the lens of 80s or 90s thriller or horror or sci-fi movie. You know, something's outside. She's holding these arbitrary scissors. Like, what is she preparing herself for, protecting against? And then, but at the same time, it's so painterly and art historical. So I'm trying to kind of mishmash these sets of images and reference points in order to draw a parallel between the use of cinema and the use of painting as both methods of portraying and furthering and spreading a message that furthers our adherence to a storyline. So like
Hmm.
the Bible or any myth gets illustrated, it becomes copy and pasted and spread in as woodcuts and paintings and engravings and more paintings, and becomes illustrated to us through, and Greek mythology, it's the same thing. It's illustrated to us through paintings, through time. And so the original and what the whole show is about as well is the awe, the sublime, and the ineffable, the divine spark, or whatever the thing is, whether it's the angel. It gets called something by humans who name it and then illustrate it, but what it was is unknown to us. Like, what was the angel? What was the beam of light? What was the burning bush? It's God. It's something unknowable, something so that we humans have the tendency to need to name and apply language to and perceive through a cultural lens, and then illustrate and disseminate. And so I'm interested in the image part of that technology, dare I say, like that way of spreading
Right.
language becoming visualized.
With there's one painting, Wake Up, Mutate, and Ascend, where that, the characters in the painting are looking up in many of the paintings. Um, but there's also, I think, with systems of belief and devotion comes kind of its foil or opposite, which is skepticism. And like there's a tonality in a lot of your work, and I think still here in a different degree, of that skepticism where it feels like they're rolling their eyes as much as they're looking up. And like that sensibility of like poking fun or like introducing a kind of skepticism also feels sort of important to the story, and to like look at that technology in a different way.
I really enjoy that you see them as potentially rolling their eyes. I think just in terms of the work I make, I always want there to be a potential double, if not, you know, plural reading. As you'll notice, all of the paintings, or most of the paintings in the show, the kind of visual through line is that, like Ajay said, the characters are looking up, and we don't see what it is they're looking up at. And that for me is the kind of theme of the show, is this tendency to look up and the need to look up, and the wonder of celestial awe that could be just outside of the frame. But to your point about the rolling eyes, I mean, the tone of myself and my work is always unless, you know, so that's built in, and I appreciate that you see that. I think in terms of skepticism, in response to faith, there we go, we found it. That's the painting.
Yeah.
In a sense. Skepticism as a kind of direct counterpart to faith, I think could be you could talk about skepticism as science, right? So it's like
Mhm.
fact-based, science-based. I believe in science is inferring, I don't believe in faith, I don't believe in myth, I believe in information. And that's where I think we get the technological side of this phenomenon. The phenomenon being, is it UFOs? Is it aliens? Whatever it is that we cannot explain, that is sublime, that has been speaking to people and evading physics and driving us mad, what Carl Jung refers to as a visionary rumor of the myth of UFOs. And By the way, side note, UFOs doesn't mean like aliens in a spaceship. It means an unidentified flying object or aerial phenomena as it's been rebranded. Like there
Okay.
is something unknown. I'm not saying like there's guys in a little, like green guys in a UFO. Not saying that there aren't that, but there is something unknown, always has been, always will be, that we throughout time have used different cultural lenses and language to name differently. I think that back to the faith versus skepticism in the, materialist, since the Enlightenment, we have a scientific way of explaining things away. And so the experts, the scientists, the nuts and bolts, the military viewpoint of explaining this thing is technological. So skepticism is technology. That's where you have the UFO phenomenon being explained as, or being perceived as, crafts, because we understand through a technological modality, something up there must be a craft because we have airplanes and we have SpaceX and we have crafts. If you were in the, like, the year 500 BC and you saw something up there glowing and speaking to you and illuminated and zooming around, not knowing what a craft is, you have faith and you say it's an angel. So I'm
Mhm.
interested in there's a dichotomy there, but it's the same. If you strip away the lens through which it's being perceived and the language being used to describe it, skepticism and faith, maybe, I don't know if they go away, but the thing perceived doesn't change. The experience doesn't change. It's the language that we use to make sense of it that does.
Right. In terms of how you wield that, I feel like you've comedy and like humor has been almost a technology in itself for you, where oh, this one in particular kind of I don't know, I've like a visceral reaction to this painting. Partially maybe because of the title. When I see
Another play on
nonprofit,
words.
it's yeah, because it really does. I mean, no shade to anybody that this might somehow implicate, but like, there's something about this that made me feel like, oh, this is like the person that leads the nonprofit, and like, do they believe in art? Like, is there a belief here? And it just made me think about kind of the realms of belief and devotion and like the appearance of it. Like, what is it to be rather than to seem, or to seem rather than to be? But like to go back to humor, I feel like in past shows you've worn that humor like more on your sleeve, and this is the first show that felt, I mean, literally darker. Um, and two, the ways in which like you've used food as like a surrogate for thinking about female sexuality, and also just the ways in which food and sexuality can kind of be interchangeable.
Mhm.
And like there's only one painting that even really has food, and it feels like a really like it's a shift. It's I can't remember the name of the painting, but it's the one with the knife through
Um,
the bread.
body amnesia. We can
Body amnesia. Yeah, this is like a far cry from kind of the maybe more slapstick approaches that you've had. And it was interesting to see this because there was like it's an arresting image, and there are things that delve into fashion and yeah, just a sort of fashion and styling, but to very different ends. Like how are you thinking about humor in this moment?
Well, I want to acknowledge, first of all, that yes, mayonnaise is a fashion icon and statement. I'm glad that we all agree on that. This is, as you noticed, one of the only shows I've ever done that doesn't have some sort of, and I don't want to say gimmick in a derogatory sense, but I'm speaking about my own work, so I guess I can. It doesn't rely on some sort of humor gimmick or like environmental shift. I mean, a lot of the shows that I've had have sculpture as well as installation, video, sound, maybe a carpet or like fake grass or something, as though, because I've always enjoyed creating an environment because I love going to see an exhibition and really being in it and immersed in it. And I have always done that, but in not doing that, this felt kind of vulnerable because I was like, I guess everyone's going to see my paintings with nothing on, like no kind of razzle dazzle around them. But that felt really important to do in this moment, and also because this body of work does demarcate a shift in even the tone and the themes. I mean, a lot. This is not about I mean, of course, there's a through line with all of my work. It's impossible to separate the art from the artist. But I think that the commodity part that this is talking about is not the commodities in this image, but it's more about like the commodity of the painting itself and
Hmm.
and how what paintings have done throughout history, as in terms of storytelling, in terms of being a vessel for belief or for showing something. But and also film, like it's so much about sci-fi and Hollywood and the movies that help us create what we're allowed to even imagine in the realm of sci-fi. Like, side note, just for sci-fi, sci-fi is philosophy if you think about it. It's like flushing out an idea all the way. Otherwise, you're just reading like a hypothetical crazy idea, like what if the aliens are actually plasma, or like, but you need like a real movie, flushed out characters, like the Titanic, for example. That's a true story, but you needed a fictional story to flush out the real emotion and feeling of what happened. So I think sci-fi is a really important, and film is an important technology, but also commodity. Getting away from the humor question here, sorry. um I didn't think that this needed humor because and it's hard for me to not incorporate it. I'm kind of like class clown at every turn, but I mean, this is a kind of funny painting. This one's kind of funny.
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, I showed you that image of a book I saw, but it's like a, like a bad 80s book cover or movie cover where like the killers in the household domestic item becomes horrifying. But I guess this show, once again, is not, it's my least funny, but because I think the topics are interesting enough to just be um beautiful and perceived as such. And I think whether you know the thing that I'm thinking through and the books that I'm reading that, that brought me to this visual exploration, you don't even need to know that because you recognize art history in it and you recognize perhaps the cinematic in it. And I don't know if it needs to grab you with humor. I think it can just be visually um, available and ideally visually arresting.
Yeah, I mean it is. I think there's more space for the viewer in that way too. In this particular instance, it's like, yeah, it's not that it's not funny. I mean, like seeing a jar of mayonnaise and a baguette, it's not the typical nature
Not
more.
funny.
Yeah, but it also, I think, allows, I feel like so often people are thinking about like how, like, what is this critical of, and what are you critiquing, and what do you like, and critique is such a I think sometimes it can be such a flat word, and I think sometimes humor can allow for something like a little more holistic, where a joke can critique and embrace at the same time. And it's not like you have to overthink that, because if you do, the joke falls apart. But you know that that landed with the person because they're laughing, and then now they have to like sort of suss out their own feelings about something. And that I think is like kind of what happens more in the show. We have to suss out our own feelings about the things that you're presenting.
Yeah, I don't think that they need to be laugh out loud funny to have something funny about them because you can I mean, that's funny too. There's a big red butt and
Right,
whose hand. And I mean, I don't know. I didn't go into this with any kind of intention of being not funny or funny. I just made this work. So,
right.
and I think that it's, I'm explaining myself so much, and artists tend to do that. We want to, use so much language to speak about the work, but also, side note, I just made it. It's work that I wanted to make. I was inspired by what I was inspired by because it's what I was thinking about. I've been thinking about and reading books about like consciousness, physics, mythology for years, and I never let it enter into my visual practice because I just didn't know how. And then I realized I don't have to know how. I can just do what I do, which is paint people and reference media, art history, fashion, imagery around me, advertising. Like the images that come into my eyes come out my hands, like that's just what happens when you're a porous, spongy artist in the world. You're just sort of attuned to stuff. And by the way, speaking of being attuned to stuff, I've noticed, so like just having been in Paris and seeing some things from Fashion Week, there was a lot of planetary, if you saw the new Chanel, I'm not sure, but it was like almost like a planetarium. One of the shows had models looking up at the end, Valentino, and everybody was sending it to me like, did they see your show? I'm not saying they did or didn't, but I mean, I think that being, and that's not fashionable. It's more about tuning in culturally and realizing that maybe there is a moment where we're looking up. Obviously, there was the drones and orbs thing in Jersey. There's all these Congress hearings about, UAP, and they're trying to be transparent. We have multiple wars. I mean, with the anxiety of that, and the anxiety, by the way, in like the 50s of the bomb, that's when you also have
Hmm.
the, beginning of like the Roswell and the UFO story kind of become really mainstream. And so in its reach. And so I think that there's something also to be said about being um, tuned in to what feels important and realizing maybe that you start to notice patterns of what you start to see around you. And so I'm seeing a lot of looking up. I'm actually seeing a lot of people having celestial questions. I'm seeing a resurgence also, by the way, back to technosis, the tech and spirituality space. Like think about, like a Burning Man, or think and how like CEOs are trying to kind of like do a lot of namaste, zen the stress away. Like I mean,
Hmm.
there's a combination of where there is technology, there is some sort of mystical worship. Where there is the new iPhone, there's a line around the block of people that are like, there's something to the combination here that you can, I mean, not because of the work you're looking at will you start to notice, but if you think about those two things together, the spiritual and the technological, as you said before, faith and skepticism, it's something that kind of you start to see. And so I think I'm on a really loop-de-loop way of answering. I didn't make it funny on purpose. I'm just tuning into or not funny on purpose, rather. I'm just tuning into what what I felt I needed to make.
Yeah, there's definitely, I feel like we are in a moment where there's a lot of things that are questioning the kind of foundations of what humanity is and why we're here, especially as, I think like when we talk about AI, it feels like such a large question that it's almost ridiculous when we talk about it. But there is, I think, something very existentially important about it. And I think it's part of the reason why people are asking some of these deeper spiritual questions. Like what I think about though is how those questions can lead someone to interior personal freedom and how it can lead to structural control. And like, with you're talking about the CEOs of the world, Peter Thiel, for instance, talking about how if we regulate AI, the Antichrist is coming. And like for a person who is trying to get the data of every single human being and then have AI sort of run that, it feels extremely terrifying in that I think like it feels more snake oil salesman-y to me, where it's like I'm going to use belief as this technology in order to do the things that I need to do. And I wonder, like, there's actually a really good essay by Paul Chan where he talks about art and the role of art, and like basically art's kind of good for teaching people how to call bullshit. Like it's the thing that like it kind of trains your cleverness, and like in the way that Odysseus is clever, and that this is a way for us to kind of see the things and see through things and still love on them, but like there's a different way that we can operate and kind of start calling bullshit in maybe more productive ways. And I wonder if like calling bullshit is part of like what drives you.
100%. A small thing that comes up when you mention, AI and calling bullshit. I think, I mean, I don't even know how to start talking about all that. But one thing I think we're going to visually start to be able to call bullshit on is AI images. Think back to 3 years ago when Dolly first came out. We were like, wow, oh my God, is that real? And then, now it's kind of like almost like old people on Facebook being like, look at this kitten that's riding a dolphin. And we're able to be like, I know it looks real, but we know it's AI. And I think that art and the visual, physical materiality of a paintbrush stroke, for example, show them off. Let's look at the zoom, look at the paintbrush strokes. But I think that that's going to provide an antithesis or like an antidote to this, the perfection of an AI generated image. Now, I don't doubt that AI can generate very realistic looking paintbrush strokes, but not in person. The physical tactility. And so I don't know. I don't want to be optimistic in this moment because I don't know. But I do think that, in a moment of AI slop and absolute trash everywhere, it feels great to go look at masterworks in the museums, doesn't it? It's like you can actually, in terms of calling bullshit, see and feel the handmade quality of paint. Maybe that's also why I don't know, maybe there's a reason why I didn't make video and sculpture and installation here. I will be doing that in my next show, everybody. I'm not denouncing those materials and those mediums, but like, maybe something about painting felt really important to do right now in a moment where I could have obviously had something fabricated, or
Hmm.
I don't really tend to do that, but I could, it's like, oh my God, it's a New York show. Should I have a big, should have a UFO in the middle of the space made that rotates and like has, hymnal songs coming out of it. No, maybe actually,
Yeah.
yeah. No, but I think maybe there's something about some relief to be found in that simple act of painting and remembering art history in this moment. I don't know. That sounds kind of saccharine. I think delete that response from the record. Next question.
I mean, I guess there is like, it is your stated belief in painting. And I think that's still up for debate. I think that's part of what is sort of generating the conversation and generating like the interest around what it means to make art, what it means to make something in the world. But I don't know if those questions are solved, and I don't know if I don't fully trust like that we won't get to a point where there will be paintings out in the world that are generated by machines that
Oh, I mean,
think people made
we're
them.
there. We're there. But right this second, I don't know. I mean, we all have the ability to not do that.
And
So
in a sense, it's like the thing that you're also talking about when you talk about belief is like belief takes a group. It has to be more than one. Like it has to be a shared, something that's shared.
so does
And to me,
conspiracy. Conspiracy just means more than one person conspired, right? So I think there's something really important about, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no,
so,
please
like
do.
you just hit on a really perfect idea, which is that this is about what groups of people do and how groups of people are controlled, or how groups of people do something to protect themselves from being controlled, or how groups of people unite to, um, fight against the ennui or existential threat of the fact that we die. Like the fact that we die and that's the only thing we know we do. Like for sure, we for sure die is a really hard, I think, pill to swallow. And I think cultures have created the idea of an afterlife. By the way, not saying that there isn't one. For afterlife believers, don't come at me. But like, I just mean that this idea, and by the way, I kind of really think there weirdly is one on like the quantum plane because I'm really interested in weird consciousness, telepathy, all kinds. I get into all of that woo woo alert. But the reason that we kind of flush out this idea and say that it's a perfect place and it's a pure paradise is so that we can make this life more bearable in all of its suffering and all of its unfairness and injustice and so on. And so I think that that's a human coping mechanism. And back to the idea of sort of myth and storytelling as a means of creating belief and therefore kind of corralling people into groups and creating religions or political parties or even just families. Like a family is like a nuclear circle surrounding the myth of being connected by family tie. Not that it's a myth, but like the idea is we have stories that bond us and they serve purposes. And I'm interested in how stories and the visual versions of stories, which is once again paintings and movies. I guess now it's also like, I guess digital, but I don't want to go there.
Sure.
I think these visual iterations of stories serve a really important purpose as glue to keep us together and also to protect us or allow us to, I don't know if it's to protect us, but their purposes are served by image and myth. And so, for example, back to the angel thing I alluded to in my first rambling answer, biblically accurate angel, it's like seraphim, it's rotating discs with thousands of eyes and molten topaz, and it strikes horror in the eyes of anyone who perceives it. How does that get sort of domesticated into a blonde baby angel it's through painting, right? And it's also
Hmm.
what agenda does that work for? Who like brought to you by a big angel corporation? Like we don't want angels to be
Right.
scary and horrifying. That's monstrous. That's not going to help the kind of Christian agenda here. Let's make angels pretty and blonde and curly and then how do angels then get transformed through media, movies, emojis, Halloween costumes, Victoria's Secret angels, and become this other thing that is so divorced from the original Seraphim, which is that rotating disc thing, which, by the way, sounds a lot like a UFO, rotating disc, telepathic communication, radiation, like back to El Greco, all of those paintings of St. Francis of Assisi, I believe he did hundreds, or at least over 100. He's looking up and he's being pierced by the stigmata from the angel, but it's giving radiation. He dies of blindness like a year later. So there's an obvious through line, and I'm not the one that came up
An
with it.
obvious through
I'm
line.
not I'm not like a, like conspiracy researcher. It's this thought is from Diane Walsh Pasulka's amazing book American Cosmic. I'm also really drawn to Jacques Vallée's book Passport to Magonia, and there's a lot of books that talk about angels and aliens as a through line. But my point is that the paintings of St. Francis of Assisi help allow for that horrifying angel to
Mhm.
become a cute human form, humanoid, one might say, like flapping wings, sweetie pie angel. And I think that serves a purpose. And I'm just interested in how we continue to do that with cinema. We continue to use images, paintings, and movies to perpetuate stories and myths and give them domesticated form so that they're easier to digest and they do the job of what it is they're meant to do: create belief, create community, protect us from something.
Do you think that we keep reproducing the same myths to our detriment?
That's such a good question. I think like Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, will say that we keep reproducing the same myths, period. To our
Hmm.
detriment. I mean, everything we're doing is to our detriment. So I guess, yeah. But I'm not sitting here criticizing the myths themselves.
Right.
And I'm not poking a hole in religion or UFO belief or other esoteric beliefs. I'm just saying that belief and the occult and esoteric ideologies, things pop up around moments of anxiety or technology, the anxiety around death, for example, like I was saying before, the anxiety about like, what is that rotating thing that people keep seeing? So we create a nice story that allows the awe and undescribable, unknowable phenomenon to be something that's doing something. I mean, like think about the myths of like, I'm sure many like indigenous groups have myths around weather. Oh,
Hmm.
it's raining because the gods are sad. Like, and then later on, technologically, we can be like, oh, it's raining because of, I don't know. I'm not going to try to like, like misfrizzle the weather, but it's like,
Yeah, weather patterns.
gases and heat and whatever. But me sounding trying to explain rain and realizing I don't know what rain is. But the point is that like we illustrate and create myths to explain things that are otherwise inexplainable. And humans
Hmm.
want to explain. We are a storytelling animal. We have oral tradition all the way back, and that's what we do to calm the fact that we don't know, the like metaphysical wonder and unknowable infinity out there. I mean, it's daunting. And when we start to actually, like, if you look up actually some shit about the universe, you're gonna lie in bed at night just like, it's so big and expanding. Like, so instead we have, we make a cute cartoon emoji of a star, and we can draw the little moon with like the moon is this cute sleepy circle in the sky. I mean, we have these ways of personifying and animating and adding maybe making the moon into a beautiful woman in Greek mythology. Like there's just so many ways that we make these things feel okay. And
Yeah.
back to my paintings for a second, I think these paintings are aware of themselves as being a product of the human tendency and desire to mythologize that which is otherwise spooky in its unknowableness.
Hmm. There's, I think with this show, but maybe in prior shows and also in your video work, I feel like there's an awareness of how meaning comes together and how like one, how to get a laugh or how to make something sexy or how to make something like how to make a commercial, like going really like relying on tropes or genres. And like what I've seen in the work before is that it's like you like to glitch those things. And that the glitch almost becomes a way to make us aware of like, okay, so what happens when this thing breaks? What do we see when that breaks? Like, what do we see when the commercial starts to fall on itself? And like, seeing uh, there's always been like a kind of Tim and Eric vibe to some of the video work that I know that, you all are friends and those are collaborators of yours. And it feels like that gets pronounced in the video work, but here I think it's a softer glitch. It's a way of like thinking along these ideas, and I think really being excited about it because like if you were just trying to expose something, I don't think you would love painting. I don't think you would try to keep doing this over and over and over and over and over again. So there is a love and a desire to like find why this works and why this is like doing something in the world, and then also to see how can I provide like a little bit of a glitch.
I love glitch as the term here, and I feel very seen. So that I appreciate that that you noticed that. Um, Ajay, speaking about my video work, I'm not sure everyone's familiar with my video work, but I love making it, and I feel like it's the place I get to be really funny, and I get to actually be like a really true version of myself. Because on one hand, I think that's why I love Tim and Eric. It's why I love David Lynch. I think the strongest film and video stuff that sticks with me as an artwork is stuff that's both funny and sad, or like
Mhm.
scary and true and beautiful. Like the place where these things glitch and the place where these things fall apart, like you said, and expose the scaffolding that was holding it up, and it falls away, which is why I love, and we've discussed this, a smile. Like a smile is like this thing that we utilize in order to have politeness, get through social niceties. It's also beautiful and happy. And then if it's kept for a little too long, it's scary, it's twisted, it's
Right.
sad. It's like Mia Goth at the end of, I forget which movie that is, Pearl, or one of those ones where she just like in a casting and she's just crying and she's
Right.
smiling. There's that, and we all recognize that human thing where two feelings are glitching, right? And so back to the glitching between, two genres or tropes. That's this painting actually perfect. I'm glad this one is up. For me, this one
Yeah.
is a glitch between, on one hand, it looks kind of like Renaissance fair, which, by the way, Renaissance fair in itself is like cosplay of Renaissance, obviously. So there's like a neo reference to something that was serious in its original iteration, of course. And then that also brings up, like video game, animation, anime, like cosplay stuff. But it also has this the bright green light that's reflecting all of here. I mean, I that was so much fun to paint. Um, the eeriness that indicates something unnatural but technological, and so it has that like kind of video game thing. And then, she's on her knees. What does that indicate? There's so many different readings of what that could mean. Is it prayer? Is it subjugation? Is it some secret third thing? But I think that for me, the glitching of genres, or the glitching between, I love that you said that. Thanks for that. Like the collapse where the thing can be read multiple ways is where I find it really interesting. And yeah, I'm not trying to define or expose something. I'm not a journalist, thank God. But like, I'm interested in visually bringing, and you'll see this in my video work. It's almost straight up parody, my video,
Mhm.
until it falls apart. And when it falls apart, so this, in a way, you could say this is almost parody, although it's not so funny, of art historical paintings, but it falls apart in certain places where, like the painting on the far left here, like things are cut off and cropped in a way that indicates almost iPhone cropping. And so it obviously it can't be from that era. And so, yeah, I'm interested in taking two things that are seemingly disparate, overlapping them or comparing them, and letting their edges be porous and glitch, as you said, in order to sort of show the similarities and maybe expose, yeah, what's behind it.
I think, David Lynch is a great example here. And also kind of, when we're talking about how societies think about these larger things, where they build stories and make symbols, and there's something deeply terrifying about the symbol in Lynch. And I'm wondering if, to me, this feels like you sloughed off a skin from prior shows. Like there's a little bit more vulnerability. I'm curious how that feels and whether going closer and closer towards what symbols can do will induce a similar terror. Because it's a scary place to be. I think for a long time I didn't really understand the power of them. And then I remember one, it was like watching Twin Peaks in its entirety, which terrified the shit out of me, and in the best way.
Hmm.
And then I had a conversation, like just like a random conversation with the artist David Altmed, where he was talking about, he was going on his own sort of, let's say, induced journeys, and he he got very grave and he was like, we really don't understand what symbols are. And it was like a moment when I was like, okay, I need to sit with this. Like the way that you're thinking about storytelling, or that the painting of the dress in particular was one that kind of it to me it's the one that like feels like the biggest rupture in the show because it's so hard to place or think about. It's like kind of beautiful and a little grotesque and um, just strange in a very different way. And I guess this is a very roundabout, slightly shaggy question about where you're at with the closeness of these terrifying things.
Where I'm at with the closeness of terrifying things. I mean, to go back to the idea that you brought up about vulnerability, I mean, yeah, like I had said before, and you brought up, this is a vulnerable show for me because it's stripped away from a lot of the easier, however, still difficult to make. And I'm not trying to
Mhm.
like derail, like to be derisive to my own work, but I guess once again, I'm allowed to do that. But it's less easy, it's less in your face funny, it's less, like potential for virality, which never did on purpose, but happened with a few of the sculptures I made earlier in my career. And so it doesn't rely on things that would be an easy, like dopamine burst, aside from, of course, like pretty colors. But these
Mhm.
paintings are a little spooky. I mean, like this painting kind of scares me a bit too. It's both beautiful. It's a beautiful, like, long flowing red hair and a pretty princess dress, so there's something about it that's spooky. She's in the dark. All these characters are in the dark. We don't know where they're placed. But so to the vulnerability point, yeah, I mean, I'm scared. I was scared, and I'm very happy with how the show has gone. And it feels like people really relate to painting and can sit with images. And I don't have to sort of hold anyone's hand, although I'm sitting here over explaining myself, but that's what I do. And then in terms of, I mean, like the horror of symbols, I mean, like a man and his symbols. I don't know. I welcome the exploration of symbols, multiple meanings, language, semiotics. This is the stuff that I like, and I
Mhm.
like to be a little freaked out, and I like to be both like over the top obvious, and then also like the knife. And
Mhm.
there's the phallic, there's the yonic, there's the household, there's the domestic, there's the eerie, there's the danger, there's the da da da, and I want everything to be so pregnant with that potential for reading. Like, I love that you came to this conversation with readings based on visuals, based on titles, based on your own set of the Rolodex of information that you store, and that you came with readings that like were not me. I didn't embed those into the work at all. And so I'm really interested in the potential for multiple readings. And that's why I love to scramble and confuse. But I
Mhm.
would say that this is my least confusing show.
I mean, I guess you already talked about telepathy, so I don't feel like this is off topic. But have you heard of this podcast, the Telepathy Tapes?
Of course.
I just started listening to this, and
Oh, you
it's
just started. You got to get to the end.
I'm
You
on.
cannot leave it in the first few, because the first few it's like, okay, maybe. And then it's like bawling your eyes out by episode 8. And then you're going to have to do so much other reading, which I will provide for you very happily. Um, because I mean, like quantum means telepathy could be real, right? So I believe
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I think I don't know about you. Actually, this is before I derail any of this. Um, I'm curious, have you had anything happen to you that has made you feel like I don't understand this or I don't know what has happened?
I feel kind of, maybe this is me trying to summon that, but I haven't had any experience. And I'm talking about this like experiences and the phenomenon in this way. I think it's actually good that I haven't had any experiences that allows me to do, because my next body of work I'm making is really about that.
Hmm.
And if I were to be an experiencer, whether it's like religious or like extraterrestrial or interdimensional or like crypto terrestrial, who knows? I would maybe be coming to this with a bias, but I'm coming to this as like a purely open, curious person, looking at the visual possibilities, looking at the way these things are spread. I'm a huge podcast and audiobook consumer, and I read a lot and listen a lot to everything that is based in some sort of like mystery unraveling, coming to it from philosophy, coming to it from psychology, coming to it from quantum physics, like I keep saying, and consciousness and all of these studies. I'm just such a curious sponge, and I'm painting, and I need to be listening to something that really takes my brain and totally transfixes it so that my hand and eye can just do their thing. So I'm not overthinking
Hmm.
painting. So it's like vital to the process. But over the past few years, I mean, I've read so many of these books, and because I'm not going down one particular avenue with it, I'm reading things that are diametrically opposed to each other, that like they can't both be true. And that's what I think makes it really unbiased, the way I'm coming to this as somebody who's purely open, and I'm seeing the, like, I don't want to say hypocrisy, but the trickster nature, which that's a term that comes up a lot, but the multifaceted potential variety in this thing that once again kind of reifies my original take here, which is that these experiences have always happened. They're different per person. They're perceived through the human perceiving apparatus, which is the body and the eyes and the descent, the five, is it five we have? Yeah. I guess the
So
sixth
I
sense,
guess that we know. Yeah.
five that we know of, like the mere five senses that we have access to is our limited tool or technology to perceive what is unlimited vibrating particles and chaos, and we make sense of it like this is pencil, these are my hands. That's through language. And like I'm getting all Lacanian here, but like it's through language precedes the amount of things we can even be open to experiencing or perceiving. Like, and that's, I get really interested in biocentrism, which I think everyone should read Robert Lanza's book, Biocentrism. Have you read that, Ajay?
I haven't read
Oh,
that.
we talked about it, right, the other day.
I think it came up
I maybe
briefly.
mentioned it because it's, anyways, I'm not gonna start trying to paraphrase this like, like book about consciousness, but the more you look into really the experts in these really innovative fields of consciousness and all of these like these science wonderings, you get to this place of high strangeness where even quantum physics says that, you know, spooky action at a distance, which is the double slit experiment, it's spooky, it's magical, it's crazy. And the second that you get to that place where you are allowing for things to be on a subatomic level, in two places at once or something, you've admitted that the world is a much more mysterious place than materialist science and would allow for us to believe it is. And there's a reason that the myth that everything is exactly as we think it is exists, is because it allows us to not like freak out all day. Because if we had our ontological like frame of mind completely like slashed by seeing UFOs and a bunch of stuff come down, or, you know, putting my hand through a table or any matrix stuff, we would all freak out and we wouldn't go to work. And how could capitalism work if we weren't going to work because we were freaked out? So I think that there's a set of reasons to why we don't question too much, but the science, the real science community that is not just, you know, like checking off the normal stuff, but really looking into what could possibly be out there in terms of physics and stuff. Trying to they always get to a place that forces them and us to consider really out there potential and energy and stuff. And I love how that stuff very easily veers back to the Burning Man of it all. And so I'm not saying I know the answer. I'm sitting here just being like, whoa, that was crazy. Next audiobook. And so
Right.
I'm very intrigued by it. And what was the question?
No, it was I think we were both kind of just getting at things that are really complicated and really big. But
And that's
the
why I paint because boo, and then we just back to
well, this
painting.
kind of takes me back to like the sort of loose conversation around AI, where I
Yeah.
do feel like one thing that we will maybe that will orient us and like kind of bring us something meaningful is the honing, almost like the way that we're finally starting to explore the inner depths of the oceans. Like there are depths to things that we're finally starting to look at in a new way, and I'm excited about what that holds.
How is that with AI?
So what I mean is like
Is the
returning
opposite.
to the returning to the body, returning to consciousness, and seeing like, okay, so these are the five senses that we know. There's maybe we understand like I feel like we thought we understand 100% of it, but I think we're starting to learn that that percentage is pretty inaccurate and that there's a lot that we're learning about our own senses that can
We don't
deepen
know
our
why we
experience.
yawn. Like there's certain okay, the oxygenation. Oh, because it's not because you're tired. But anyways, there's so much interesting stuff that we don't know. I mean, I'm not going to start getting into like facts I learned, but I do think that we think we know a lot, and if one were not to look deeply into things, one would think that they have it figured out there. We can Google it, whatever it is. And I do
Mm.
fear that, I mean, I don't know anything about AI, but I fear that we're getting lied to all day because you ask it something and it's like,
Right.
you're 100% correct, babe. And then you're like, but wait, what about this other thing? And they're like, you're right, I was wrong. Here's the actual thing. If they hallucinate, it hallucinates, but I'm sure that's just the interface that we play with when we chat GPT all day. But of course, like maybe AI is going to get us to further medical places, but like I have no business even commenting on that.
Yeah, yeah. I only mean it in terms of what it does to recenter the body itself and like practices of the body. So painting being one of those practices, that it's not simply us being impressed by someone painting, but it's what it does specifically to you, and why these conversations are helpful, because there's an embodied knowledge that you can then share with us that has everything to do with language and everything to do with history and culture and so many other things. But it's also the fact that you did it and that something changed in you from that last show to this show to the next show that will be important for other people to hear and understand.
I love that you said embodied knowledge. I think that maybe that is the antidote to this like disembodied knowledge, right? Where it's like the act of, like I was saying, there's oral traditions that have been such an important part of the human growth throughout millennia. Maybe the embodied knowledge of actually doing versus it's like laughing and that effect on you versus typing LOL with a straight face. I mean, that's a really
Yeah.
simple way of looking at it, but I think that embodiment um has to be centered and important. And maybe that's why painting feels important right now, to me at least. Um, I'm looking at this painting. Um, that's a cool image. I like how the wall is kind of covering half of that window where the eyebrows of that building are just peeking out. I should paint that image. But this painting was interesting to me because that shirt is like an 80s shirt that Whitney Mallet is wearing in the painting. I believe it's Mugler. But I love that shirt. I saw her wearing it. I was like, you have to come over. I'm painting it because it has this sort of, there's a retroness and a futuristicness. And
Hmm.
I really like the kind of ahistorical play between, you could almost imagine a TV show about the future and a technological future, kind of like the retro future thing of like Barbarella, Star Trek, like these visualizations of a future that has not yet come, and the way that we imagine it through the technology that we currently have access to with like shiny metallic objects, which is why, by the way, the frames are all metal. You can't really see them in these images, but I wanted to bring up the idea of like shininess and metallicness, bringing up both ideas of worship and preciousness, but also futuristicness. And it's kind of, I'm interested in this like line through time where you're looking at like standing in the future, standing in the past, looking towards the future, or standing in the future or the present, looking at the past and seeing what has stayed the same, what has changed, and what kind of material visual ideas we have that we think will illustrate those things. And so this one to me was interesting to make, and I love this painting. It's one of my favorites because I don't know what year it looks like it was made in or what year it's depicting because it has that past future combination. And I don't mean it like in a fashion sense, of course, that there's like shoes and a shirt, but that doesn't seem like what's important. For me, it's more about the like physicality of materials and there being this almost like sci-fi retro, perhaps Renaissance, almost communication between ages or epochs,
Hmm.
And I think that that has to do with like the grand conversation that we're having, which is like, how do we communicate with ourselves through time? How do we, story tell and build off of stories that already exist and make them or like, shape them to fit like the myth that keeps on being retold. It gets kind of squished into the possibility of a now. Um, and I feel that um, I mean, yeah, it's interesting you bring up AI, and I think that if we just zoom out for a second, is about a future and the unknown of a future, and perhaps future humans will have to create a mythology to, allow us to worship AI overlord. And perhaps the future will, reframe this moment. But I'm just interested in the way that human creation, paintings and films and stories, and perhaps tweets and songs and other kinds of products of people will, participate in the long lineage of mythology, symbolism, and image.
Sounds like a great place to end and open it up to questions.
Yeah, let's open
Thank
up to
you both.
questions. And thank you so much for all of your thoughtful questions. We could obviously chat all day. So I just really appreciate your conversation and yeah, questions.
No, it's been fun.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. The first question is from Gerald Scott. I'm going to give you a chance to unmute Gerald.
Hi. My question simply is like what keeps you inspired as an artist and just like if you feel like you are in a creative rut, what helps you get out of that?
Um, I don't know if I love the word inspired because it's not like I see something and then I'm like, Eureka. I'm just always making stuff. And I feel it's important to stay making stuff. And if a certain medium, because I work in multimedia, if a certain medium's not feeling good, I can bop to the other one. Like if painting for some reason is feeling kind of itchy, I can bop over to film or thinking about some other different painting. I mean, I get irritated or in ruts all the time with my own work. And so I have multiple things going. And I think the answer is to not stop.
Thank you for that question, Gerald. The next question is from an audience member who would love to know how you consider hope in your work as it concerns skepticism, belief, and conspiracy. It makes sense to look up to the celestial to question or look for answers. I wonder if you think of creating answers or making, sorry, I wonder if you think of creating answers or making sense through your painting, or if the intention is to reveal something already there.
Thank you for that nice question. I don't know if I think about hope, but I think hope is built into it because part of what people are looking up at could be hope, could be answers, could be possibility, it could be what's unknown, it could be a message that I can't speak to. I'm not trying to illustrate answers. I don't know. I hope it's clear. I don't know or claim to know anything. I'm just a sponge for what could be. And I'm interested not in all of the options of what could be, but rather the human ability and need and tendency to look up and ask anything at all. Like that seems to be a human tendency throughout all of time that humans have always looked up and out or underwater, perhaps, and asked what's out there. Who am I? What am I doing here? And I think that's the most fundamental human question. And I would never dare answer it.
Thank you for that answer, Chloe. The next question is from Julia Shepherd. And Julia says, I love the dresses and colorful tights and shoes in these paintings. Could you discuss more what role the clothing played in this series and how you decided what clothes you wanted to use and show?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned, for example, my friend Whitney was wearing that shirt and it just kind of it spoke to me right away because I saw that through line through time and I liked that like ahistorical sense. I also thought reflective materials and jewel tones were important because they both play a role in El Greco paintings, Baroque paintings, and also in sci-fi and movies. You could imagine a movie where the space invaders are wearing like shiny metal outfits and like I said, very Barbarella, very you know, Star Trek or something. I don't know. But the idea being that the clothes would contribute to this like ahistorical thing, and the colors would also be the colors that are found in both an El Greco. I think also shininess has to do with preciousness, has to do with like something being valuable or mysterious, like oil spill to visual or like reflective metal or shiny satin always appeals to me. It's really fun to paint and very beautiful, and it's what I'm drawn to when I'm looking at paintings in a museum. But it has to do with like value and preciousness and mystery.
Chloe, I just had a additional question to add on to that. Like, especially when you said value, like it's the kind of materials that could be really valuable or really cheap.
Yeah.
And I was
Like,
just curious, like if that's also another part of that whole equation.
yeah, or really new or really old. I mean, when I think about silver, like I mentioned with the frames, they're like aluminum. I wanted to think of both, silver in a, you know, um, like a beautiful encrusted Bible with beautiful silver and jewels, or it could be like throwaway old like tinfoil hat, UFO conspiracy stuff. It could be, something as precious as like a craft, a technological item, a part of a plane, or it could be like some shitty technology that's obsolete. And so I like the idea of there being this multiple reading, but also with metal, it always has to do, it's like obviously like a natural substance, but it has so much to do with being man-made. I really like the dichotomy of how metal, as one of the materials that can be read as like super shitty or super valuable, can play a role.
Thank you. The next question is from Christelle. Christelle says, "Hello, Chloe. I have been following your work for a while, and I'm truly inspired by the way you render fabrics and light, especially in your last series. I was wondering if you might have one small piece of advice on how you approach layering and glazing to achieve such glow and luminous depth, like colors, underlayers, etc. Also, do you sometimes give painting workshops online?"
Thanks for that question. I don't give painting workshops online, but I do, if you've noticed, post painting videos all the time. So I'll do more of that for you, Christelle. Layering, I mean, the obvious method is the fat over lean thing, where the leaner layers, I start with really sometimes very bright luminous colors. I'll do an underpainting in randomly bright red or bright yellow. I just try different things all the time. These paintings are painted up from black. I'm not sure if that's obvious, but they're much darker and they have this kind of, I wanted there to be this like sort of spotlight chiaroscuro. But with fabrics, yeah, I mean, I'll paint up from the darkest and then highlight. I don't know how to answer that without being boring and technical, but I love, I'm going to plug the painting brand that I love. I'm not sponsored. I should be. Kama Pigments. It's from Montreal, like me. And it's a small batch handmade oils that are so beautiful. I think that if you get colors that you love, it can be really fun to paint fabric. I don't know how to answer this question. Sorry, but yeah, thicker highlights, and the highlights are super thick. I think that's what stands out about them.
Thank you for that question, Christelle. The next question is from Bennett. And Bennett, I know you wanted to ask the question yourself. If you turn your camera on, I can hand you the mic. There you are. Oh, you're still muted.
Hi, Chloe. Hi, AJ. I was interested because you both referenced like really interesting media, like that telepathic podcast, and then you talked about a few books that you're also into, and I wanted to know what they were, if you felt like talking about them.
Sure. So the podcast is called The Telepathy Tapes. I think maybe it was #1 in the US at a certain point. So it should be right there on Spotify. It's amazing. And the books that I was saying, well, once you listen to Telepathy Tapes, you can read Many Lives, Many Masters. It's bestseller. I think it's almost cheesy to reference, but like it's awesome. It's amazing. And Journey of Souls, both of them are written by licensed hypnotherapists that use regressive past life hypnotherapy to reveal like thousands of people in one case, and the other one is one specific patient past lives. And it sounds kind of hard to believe, but then it just becomes so intriguing. And whether you believe it or not, it's worth the read. They're fascinating. And the one Journey of Souls that speaks to thousands of people, it really illuminates a through line of how so many people are hypno regressed and say the same thing about the life between lives or the world between worlds. I mean, it's kind of giving Pixar's movie Soul, but which is also an amazing movie to watch. And I also referenced Eric Davis's book Technosis, which is a dense, amazing academic read that kind of goes through all of these different moments in technological innovation that are met with sort of esoteric or mystical or worshiping religious, not religious, but like belief they get infused with mysticism. So that's a really interesting, it goes through like theosophy and all of these different interesting moments. What else did we say? I said Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallée. I'm just like, should I pull these books up? That's an amazing book. Jacques Vallée, I was just saying this to Ajay before we turned on the cameras, but he is the French, I want to say physicist, but he's like more than just that. He's a researcher. He created ARPANET, which is the precursor to the internet, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, he's a really valued academic in that field. And he has many amazing books, like Forbidden Knowledge. What are the other ones? I've read a lot of them. Whatever. Passport to Magonia tracks all of these different UFO. It's not all UFO. It's like fairies, gnomes, angel, ghost, all of these different like psi phenomena sightings throughout time based on like newspaper articles, for example. So it would be like 1531, small town in France, a cigar-shaped craft was seen by 15 people in the village and the crops were on fire or something. And then it will be like in the neighboring town a year later. And so you end up, people describe this thing differently. Like it will be like, oh, a bunch of fairies came out of a boat that was parked in the middle of whatever. The point is, he takes all of these different like local stories that were never reported in a large way and sort of sews them together, and then you start to see a pattern emerge, which is that people perceive something through the lens of their culture. So that if you're like from Ireland, you're like it's fairies, and in the same day somebody would have seen something in Spain that's the exact same thing, but they perceive it as ghosts or something. And so it's a beautiful book that goes through it treats all of these stories like data instead of being like that's crazy, that's somebody was making something up. It goes back through time, and it's really, really important. And then I think lastly I mentioned American Cosmic by Diane Walsh Pasulka, who is a divinity scholar, and she talks about how what was once perceived as angels and divinity may be through the same thing that we're describing when we describe the UFO phenomenon.
All right, thank
And
you.
then biocentrism as well.
And Biocentrism by Robert Lanza, which is the book about how consciousness perhaps precedes matter.
Thank you so
Amazing.
much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that question, Bennett. The last question is from Andrew Sender. Similarly, if you turn on your camera, Andrew, I can let you ask the question. If not, I will ask on your behalf. I will ask on Andrew's behalf. I don't know if I gave Andrew enough time, but I don't see them. The word beauty was used a few times in this talk. It has become charged, almost suspicious at times. Yet I think of beauty less as a category of taste and more as an experience of recognition, a moment when perception and emotion briefly align. Can you talk about your conception of beauty?
I think that's so beautifully worded. Yeah, I definitely don't mean it as an adjective or an objective categorization of taste, one thing being good or bad, but it's definitely, I think, of as an experience as well. The experience of looking at something or experiencing, feeling, smelling, hearing something that brings joy and allows one to, I don't know, bask in its aesthetic qualities. I mean, I feel beauty when I look at nature. I feel beauty when I go to the Met. A lot of things can carry beauty without them being beautiful for everyone. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think it's about the aesthetic charge of pleasure for the sake of that alone, without having to be, I don't know, proving or explaining or doing anything. And so on one hand, that's rich coming from me who just explained my whole show for an hour. But I also think that painting of all sorts can exist just because it's so awesome to move paint around.
Amazing. Thank you. That was our last question. Thank you to everyone for participating in the Q&A. I know that Ajay is going to close us out with a poem, so I'll give you the floor, Ajay.
So this is a shameless plug before I say my poem. I'm also doing a talk with Eric Mack next week at WSA on Tuesday, if anybody is around or interested. Thanks, Chloe, for letting me do that plug. All right, this is a poem selected by Chloe by E. E. Cummings called Pity This Busy Monster, Mankind. Pity this busy monster, mankind, not. Progress is a comfortable disease. Your victim, death and life safely beyond, plays with the bigness of his littleness. Electrons deify one razor blade into a mountain range. Lenses extend on wish through curving where when till on wish returns on its unself. A world of made is not a world of born. Pity poor flesh. And trees, poor stars and stones, but never this fine specimen of hypermagical, ultra omnipotence. We doctors know a hopeless case if, listen, there's a hell of a good universe next door. Let's go.
Love that one.
What a beautiful way to close us out. Thank you so much, Chloe and Ajay. Thank you, Lindsay and the team at Amin Reich for their support in preparing for today's event. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art and Seeger Foundation for sponsoring our NSC program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. A donation directly supports our writers, staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free, join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Lindsay Wagos and Stacy Skolnick on the work of Topical Cream, a New York-based arts organization supporting the work of women and gender nonconforming contemporary artists. And as is Rail tradition, you can now all unmute and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all so much again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. And
Thank you.
Ajay.
Thank
you
you.
for coming out.
Thank
you.
you.
Chloe.
Yeah.
Ajay.
This
So much,
part is so
Ajay.
cute.
That was beautiful. Thank
Congratulations,
you.
Chloe.
Congratulations.